Hello, and welcome to the OnePlan Admin Essentials training video. This video will guide you through the main admin settings to get you up and running to use OnePlan. While this is the essentials, you may refer to the OnePlan help site for all our OnePlan documentation materials for how to configure and use OnePlan. Let's get started. Here I am logged into a new OnePlan group called Valley Tech PMO, which is a unique environment or site. Your group may have been created using a template and therefore may have certain configuration already done for you. Or you may be starting with a fresh blank group. This one here is blank, so I may walk you through the main OnePlan admin settings where nothing yet has been configured. I'm logged in with my Office 365 account as Daniel Williams. I'm first taken to the Getting Started page when I first log in. In order to be able to access the admin settings, my permissions for this group are set to owner. To get to the admin pages as the group owner, I'll click on the admin settings gear. Keep in mind, for this essentials video, I'm going to configure my group in a sequential order, not necessarily in order of the settings pages. So I may bounce around from one section to another. Next, I'll go to the calendar settings. I have one calendar called General, and I click on it to get all of the calendar settings. Here I can rename my calendar or choose different settings for number of hours per day, the settings for the weekends, general time availability, and also here's where I can add holidays. These are the type of holidays that would be company-wide or organization-wide. Enter the name and date. And keep in mind, you would need to add holidays each year, for example, New Year's Day the next year and the next. So these would be where you'd add all the holidays, and this will be for use with regards to your resource availability when you're assigning resources to work and what days they wouldn't be available. Please note this is different than personal time off that resources would be able to put in if they were going on a vacation or paid time off or some other time off category. After I add all of my holidays for the organization, I click Save. Next, I'm going to go into our Apps section, and I will be installing some applications. Currently, no apps have been added yet. To add a new app, I'll click the Add App button. And these are all the available apps for OnePlan. Select the desired app and follow through the install confirmation screens. When the page refreshes, navigate to the Apps page again. Once I added the Dashboards app, I can see any additional apps that have already been installed are there, and I can continue to add additional apps, such as Time Plan, which are the timesheets. Kanban Plan is for the Kanban board. As you can see, as I'm adding apps, it also adds various settings on the far left side if there are applicable settings pages for those apps. As you can see, some of these apps have a price associated to them and some of them are free. If you have any questions about the apps and their costs, you can refer those questions to your OnePlan representative to get any help with sales or questions about what apps you may have already purchased or are available to purchase. So now I've added most of the available apps for OnePlan, and I'll be able to go into the various settings pages for those apps to configure them for my use with OnePlan. Next, I'll go into the Portfolio Plan page, specifically to plan types. Plan types are important in OnePlan as other settings will be based on the plan type of each plan. Think about the different types of plans you may have in your organization. There are a few methods to set up plans. The first method is to have a flat hierarchy, where the plan types are not related to one another. Click Add Type and then enter the plan type name. For example, large projects, where perhaps the budget is over $1 million. and then add type again for small projects where the budget is less than $1 million. The second method is to build out a hierarchy of plans where there is a parent-to-child lookup relationship between the plans. So first, you add the parent-most level, such as portfolios. Then, under portfolios, you add a child plan type, such as programs. And then under that type, add another child, such as epics. I can expand this column here and delete or edit as needed. The third method is to have a blend between the two. So perhaps I'll delete this one and show that third method. So under my portfolios and my programs, I then can have multiple plan types that are equal to each other. So under program, I will add a child, such as waterfall project, for projects managed with traditional waterfall scheduling and details. And then another child under program, such as Agile project, for project teams who follow an Agile or Lean method of management. I've cleaned up the plan types for my group. Be sure to have your plan types set up correctly at the onset of your configuration, as numerous other settings will be configured according to the plan types. Next, I'll configure the Fields page. The fields are separated according to plan level, task level, backlog level, and resource level. Some fields may be added to your group automatically upon adding apps, such as these timesheet fields when I added the Time Plan app. Regardless to which section you add a field, the steps are the same. Click the New Field button. Fill in the desired settings for this field. If you will be doing cost planning, you may want a plan level field that could be used to show the cost totals. I already have a field for budget, so this will be the actual cost total field. Select your type. You can see there are numerous options here. Based on which options you select, additional field options may show. Select your default value, if any. Select whether or not this field is required. Select whether or not it's read-only. A common use case for the field to be read-only, such as this one, is a cost total field, where I do not want a user to manually key in a value, but rather have it populate based on the costs. Another common use case is if you have data coming into OnePlan from another integrated system and should not be editable in OnePlan. Select one or multiple plan types for this field to be available. And then click Save. I will add some more example fields to show different field types in use, such as Owner, which is a user field. Another field that can be a choice field, such as Overall Health. I'll click here to edit my choices. As you can see, we can bulk add choices. This field will only have a few options, so I'll add them in manually. Here you see my 3 choices for this field. Again, I'll go through my additional field settings, including selecting plan types. Since this is a choice field, I also have another option here to allow adding values. So a user could add values besides the available choices I've provided in the settings. One thing to note is that if you leave the Plan Types field blank on a field settings, that field will be available for all plan types in the group. This may be a good time saver for those common fields which should be available for all plan types. While I'm in here, I'll set the budget field to read only, as budget will be used as a cost total field for my budget cost type. There are two very important fields in the resource fields section, role and department. Edit these and add the necessary choice values. For department, click to add the choices. And then click Save. And then for role as well. So fill in all the necessary roles and then click Save and save that field. Other settings will later reference these two fields, the roles and the departments, so you want to be sure you set those with all the accurate choices. At this point, follow the same process to add all the fields needed for tracking important metadata about your plans, your schedule or backlog tasks, and your resources. Next, I will build my plan details from the Plan Details page. First, select the plan type. Plan Details form can be configured differently per plan type, since you may have different fields to show and a different arrangement of the fields. So for example, I'll begin with my portfolio plan type. Perhaps portfolios have 3 stages or phases in the process flow. So I click Add Step. So here are the 3 phases for portfolios: proposed, active, and closed. For each stage, I would also select which modules should be available for that plan. I select proposed and then click Edit. And here I select the available tabs or modules. Perhaps at the portfolio level, our organization does high-level budgeting, but not any detailed resource or schedule planning. So at each stage, I select tabs. I'll go into another plan type to focus on the layout. For now, I'll click Save, as I'm still working on my portfolio plan type, but I want to save my changes. Another example plan type is the waterfall project. For this plan type, we may have more stages. So I've created my different stages, and now I go into each stage to select the available tabs or modules. Here I select all the applicable tabs. And I would need to go back into my portfolio plan type, and also I should add in the details and the dashboard tabs as well. Details are for the form that we're configuring, and dashboard are to show the reports. So perhaps once we get to the plan stage of a waterfall project, we not only have our initial cost and resource plan, but perhaps we also start doing our scheduling and our detailed tasks. And I can click Save here and keep working on it as I progress. The layout of the Plan Details form is done via sections. Click Add for a new section. Give the section a name and select whether or not to show that section name in the header. Choose the number and style of columns and then click Add. And I'll add another one here. Once you have your sections added, drag the desired fields into the sections. And rearrange as needed. Sections can be set to shown or hidden per stage. I will add another section. For my timesheet fields here, to hide a section, first select the stage that you want it hidden. Notice when I select the Create stage, it is now outlined in a bolder color. And I click the Hide icon. Notice that it's grayed out. When I click on the Select stage, I click again to hide it. But then on the Plan and further stages, I'll leave this section shown. Use the up and down arrows to rearrange the order of the sections. The Edit icon to edit the section title or the column titles, and then also to delete a section if needed. Next, we will configure the Financial Plan settings. Select Financial Plan from the navigation. First, we add the Custom Cost fields. Custom fields show in the Financial Plan view to see or add more information. Click New, and then fill in the field name. One common example is expense type. As you can see, you have different options for field type. And I'll add my choices, such as CapEx, and OpEx, and click Add. Another field could be a text or a number field, such as a PO number or charge code. So add any additional custom fields that are applicable to your organization. You may also choose the default grouping so that when users go into their financial plan, by default it's grouped by expense type, for example. You can group by choice fields. Next, add all the cost categories. A cost category is how costs or gains are broken down into smaller defined labels or classifications. We add the cost categories via the New icon. External ID is used if this is integrated with another financial system. If your organization will be tracking labor costs, add a labor cost category. It can be called labor or it can be called something else, but select under labor field the resource level field that will be added as cost categories under this labor field. Typically, it's something like role or similar. Now, each role that's in my roles field for the resource level field now shows here under labor as labor cost categories. If needed, you can edit or delete any cost category. And we also have the rates for cost categories. Rates are to be configured for each of the labor cost categories. To calculate the labor costs, hours in the resource plan are multiplied by the hourly rate. Add a new rate with a start date and an end date if applicable, and then the rate. No end date is needed if the rate is not going to change. However, if the rate is going to change, you can add another row and set the end date for the current rate and then a start date for the new rate. And then click Save. Do this for each labor cost category. After the cost categories are set, add one or more cost types. Expand the cost type section. A cost type is the larger grouping of costs for analyzing and comparing, such as budget or actual costs. Click New and fill in the new cost type form. For method, we'll select total of cost type. And the field that will be the total is a plan level field, such as budget. At this point, if you're adding a cost type and you realize you don't have the total field, you can come back and later set it once it's created. Multiplier is if you want all your values that get entered into the financial plan for this cost type to be multiplied by a certain value. For example, if I put in 1,000, all numbers would go in as 1,000 times the number entered. So 1 would be 1,000, 1,000 would be 1,000,000, etc. You can set a cost type to read only. For example, if the cost details are coming from another financial system for reference, status date puts all data in that cost type up to that date as uneditable. Everything past that date is still editable. The lock field is used with calculations to be able to lock the entire cost type. Select either financial plan and/or resource plan for the available apps. For this example, the budget will just be a financial plan cost type. And to import from the resource planner or other areas throughout the system. And then select which plan types to use for this cost type. Just like with the fields, if I leave no plan type selected, it then will be available for all the plan types. And click Add. Next, I'll add another cost type. This one will be for tracking actual costs. And earlier, I created a field called Actual Costs at the plan level. So that will be where the total from this cost type gets populated on my plan details form. And when all the rest of the fields for my new cost type are configured, I'll click Add. Here's an example where if I go back and edit this cost type, perhaps we did budgeting at all of our levels for plan types, but for actual costs, we only track them at the project level. So for plan type, I will go ahead and select Waterfall Project and Agile Project, since perhaps we don't track actual costs at the portfolio or program level, but we allow those to be summed up from the children projects. And then when I'm done, I click Save. Click the icons on the Cost Type menu to edit or delete a cost type. Click the Cost Categories icon to select which cost categories would show for each cost type. If I select all cost categories from the parent level down, I can also select to auto-include any new cost categories that may be added later. So the auto add would apply to my regular cost categories, and then I can also select it for my labor cost categories. So if later I add another role to my system, for example, it will automatically add that new role here as a cost category under my budget cost type, and click Save. Click the View Config icon to select which custom cost fields and which default grouping to use for each cost type. If you make no selection for the default group, it will default to no grouping. I'll do this again for my actual cost type. Perhaps for this cost type, we track the expense type, but not the PO number. Expand the Advanced section to allow detail rows in the financial planner and to configure exchange rates, if applicable. Next, navigate to Resource Plan. Add any types that will be used for resource planning purposes. Click New, and then enter the planning type details. At this point, I don't have a total field at the plan level, so I won't select any here. But I could come back in with a new field, committed hours, and then use the total resource hours to total to that field. For available apps, I have it for resource plan. And for planning types, I'll do resource planning at my detailed project level. And then another new type, perhaps for timesheet hours. And I can import the hours from my timesheets to get the actual hours spent. And then click Add. Here in the row menu, I can edit or delete these resource planning types as needed. There are some advanced settings available as well for resource planning. You may enable private or public entries. So rows first go in as private, and then the resource planner or plan owner would be the one to set that row to public when ready. You may enable the negotiations feature. Keep in mind the negotiations feature requires resource managers being configured for the different resources. And then also you may enable daily or weekly hours if you get to that level of detailed planning. Next, navigate to Time Plan for the timesheet settings. There are many available settings for the timesheets. In this Essentials video, we will go over just the main ones to begin using timesheets. First, add the timesheet periods under the Time Management section. You may manually add them one by one, or you may add them as bulk periods. Select the first start date, how many days are in each timesheet period, and then the number to add. If needed, timesheet periods can also be locked or unlocked, as well as deleted if a mistake has been made. Next, expand the Total section to verify where the task total hours and the plan total hours will populate. For approvals, expand the Workflow section. By default, there is one workflow step already added. Click the Edit icon to view and edit as needed. For this step, the approval type is Project Manager, meaning whoever is the owner on a plan will be the one to review and approve the time that's entered. And currently this step is set up to approve the resource time as well as the plan time. You also have the options here to require all users to follow this step, as well to approve if the person submitting is already their own approver. They can skip that step for themselves. Those are the main timesheet settings to begin using timesheets. As needed, you may come back and configure and make selections per your specific business process needs. Now that the main settings have been configured in OnePlan, it's time to add resources to the Resource Center. Navigate to the Users page. Click the Add Resource button. First, create a generic resource. Generics are used as placeholders, both for capacity planning and as temporary assignment placeholders until a named resource can be substituted. Select the generic checkbox. Enter the display name. Select the department and role. Typically, the display name for a generic resource is also the role, though not always. The rest of the fields don't apply for generic resources, so you may leave those blank and click Save. Add another resource, this time a named user. Leave the generic checkbox unchecked and begin typing the username. The system authenticates the names via the Office 365 accounts. Make a selection for the permissions. Team members and contributors will only be able to see plans to which they've been given access, whereas managers and owners will be able to see all plans. Hover over the question mark to get a reminder of what the different permission levels are. Select the department and role. If tracking resource costs and revenue at the task level, enter this resource's cost and rate here. Begin typing the name for this user's manager, as well as timesheet manager, if applicable. And if this user is a timesheet administrator, select the checkbox. This will give that user elevated permissions to be able to see and manage timesheets for all users. When done, click Save. Continue adding generic resources for each of the roles as well as the named users as needed. The Resource Managers section is applicable if you're using the Negotiations feature. You would have enabled negotiations in the Resource Plan Settings section, and then here under the Resource Managers, select a method for who would be responsible for approving and committing the resources in the resource plans. If department or role is selected, you would need to specify the manager for each department or each role. If it's manager or timesheet manager, then it would be based off of whose name was in the manager and timesheet manager field for each resource. Navigate out of the admin pages by clicking OnePlan in the header. Reminder, if you want more information about OnePlan, go to the Help menu and select OnePlan Help. Here you will see all our OnePlan documentation, such as the admin guide, the user guide, release notes, and more. Now it's time to plan.